Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Maria Gonçalves podcast show. And today I have a special guest all the way from Brisbane, Australia, Avril Johnston-Craig, who is a psychic medium, a mentor, and she offers one-on-one readings and also does platform demonstrations. So, Avril, would you like to share with everybody a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me, Maria. It's an absolute pleasure. And as you'll tell from my accent, I'm not a native Australian. So I've been in Brisbane here for 10 years, and I'm now proud to call myself Australian. Um, I'm an evidential mediumship, and I have primarily done platform work in the spiritualist churches in Edinburgh in Scotland and here in Australia. So I've now progressed to doing qualifications with the Spiritualist National Union in the UK, and I am teaching and doing private readings and just continuing to develop my evidential mediumship.
Oh, I love that. So I thought we would start off with one of the questions, which is like one of those questions that get debated forever. Do you think mediums are made or are they born? What do you think?
Well, that's a very controversial question.
Yes.
And for myself, I had no knowledge of mediumship, spiritualism, of, the influence of spirit until I was in my 40s. Now, I was a very sensitive child looking back. So there was absolutely some element of intuition, but was I born a medium? I do not think so. However, my journey was very different. I was dragged into the College of Parapsychology in Edinburgh by a work colleague in a corporate company because she knew I needed something in my life. I
I
was
love
just
that.
not as happy, as joyful, and a bit too serious. And there I was, parapsychology, absolutely fine. But it was actually a demonstration of mediumship, which I wouldn't have particularly volunteered to go for. But, I was taken aback. I couldn't understand from my degree in psychology what I was witnessing. And I knew that these very serious old ladies from Edinburgh were not there to entertain us, and they were definitely not messing about. And, I got a very direct contact myself from my father in spirit, which just blew my mind. This is a very long way of answering that question, but
That's
I then
okay.
went on to be fascinated and to visit spiritualist churches, watch demonstrations of evidential mediumship with no inkling that it's something I could ever do or would be interested in doing. And then I was invited into a closed development circle, and things started to progress from there. And I can't say I was enthusiastic about wanting to do public demonstrations, but that's what it all led to. So from my perspective, was I born a medium? No, I don't think so. I probably had the capabilities. And now when I teach, it staggers me when we teach evidential mediumship that I think everyone has mediumistic experiences.
Yes.
I think everyone has the potential to develop mediumistically, but how far that development will go depends on so many factors. It depends on our ability to absorb the education, the teaching, the learning, the development, the hard knocks, the personal development, the spiritual development. So the actual outcome to become a credible, competent medium takes a lot of work more than just a gift. And we see many mediums who are naturally gifted and have had, paranormal experiences from birth. But if they don't embrace the education and the training, then their development is compromised. So my answer is a bit of a roundabout one, but I certainly think everyone has mediumistic experiences. I think, unfortunately, many people are misguided or misinterpret them as being weird and spooky and dark, when actually they're loving, they're positive, they're evidence that our loved ones are still connecting with us in life. So that's my roundabout answer. You know, everyone that comes into these classes amazes themselves with what they can actually do, but whether they have the time to develop that to a sufficiently proficient level is really, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of, you know, making sure that you've got the right teachers and that you've got the sufficient knowledge of not just being able to do it, but actually how you're doing it, what you're doing it, and why.
Yes, the intention. The intention is a huge part of the why. Why are you doing mediumship? For me, I'm always with the intention of does it touch their heart? Is it what their soul needed to hear? Did they walk away better than I found them? Did we uplift them, right? Did we provide the proof of life so they walk away and they know without a shadow of a doubt, she had my dad, she had my mom, she had my child. Now I know they didn't just go poof in the air. That's
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. It is such a profound responsibility. And, you know, and it's difficult because we're not there to give people what they think they want. We're there to help people with what they actually need, whether that's with a psychic reading or whether we're representing their loved ones in spirit to give a communication. But,
Oh,
you know,
that's so
intention,
true.
yes. Yeah.
I've done readings, and let me know if this has happened to you, where someone comes in and they'll be like, well, I came in with the intention because I really wanted to hear from this person, but you brought the other person with the message and the evidence, and that's what I really needed, but I didn't know I needed that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the difficult thing, is to actually, during that reading, not be drawn into, because as we are all very gifted psychically, so we can be pulled into what someone wants, but to actually to be able to stay in your, within, at your soul level, within your authentic self, or with the spirit communicator to give them what they need. And it can be a little bit difficult during the reading. There's a little bit of pushing and pulling, but you have to stick with what you know to be the proper way to do it. And it, because just as you've said, I think every communication and or every psychic reading should actually be transformational, not
Yeah.
superficial.
Yeah. It touches their heart. That's just
And
me.
it, well,
Those are my words.
and it touches their soul, you know.
Yes.
And I mean, and sometimes it's difficult because the feedback you may not get at the time. You may question, you know, did I really make a significant difference there? And then you get feedback a little bit later, and wow, it really touches your soul that you've made such a significant difference in someone's life.
That is so true. And then I think too, and you just touched upon this with your education as mediums and doing this, and um, the more training you get, I find the more training I get, the more I realize I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I didn't know that. And you go deeper and deeper. So how are you finding it?
I find, you know, now teaching myself, understanding what you don't know and understanding the context of how this all works is so critical when you're actually delivering a platform communication or doing a one-to-one, because we work with the intelligence of the spirit world, and that intelligence is what's actually happening in that moment. The medium is not always, well, they're certainly not in control of, because they're surrendering
Yes.
to let the spirit world, especially in platform communications, say what they want to say. And it's holding yourself in that space of not knowing fully what you're actually unfolding, but sticking with the mechanics, sticking with its confidence. I think what I want to say is that we make all these mistakes in training to push us to the next level. And when we're actually delivering in the moment, we know that we can be slightly wrong. We know we're wanting a no to make sure we can become more accurate and to get this right. But it's a very dynamic process. And I think you have to be comfortable and vulnerable in the uncertainty and what's actually unfolding at the time. It's very exciting, but it's very nerve-wracking. So you have to be in classes where you face plant, where you're comfortable making errors to hone your skills so that when you're in the moment and delivering that contact, you're absolutely doing the very best that you can and being comfortable in that uncertainty. It's very exciting.
You know, it's funny. I was about to ask you that. What is one piece of advice you would give to students? And then you started answering it. And I was like, oh, wow. So for students that are out there and they're in classes and they're struggling and they're just like, oh, but I get the no's. Because you know how in the beginning of our mediumship, the no's were devastating. They're like, oh my goodness, I got to know. It's so heartbreaking. So what piece of advice would you give to those learning or for potential future students joining you as having you as a mentor? What advice would you give to those students that struggle with those no's?
I would say that the greatest difficulty you have actually giving an accurate reading is someone that says yes to you when it should be no, because it's so easy to go, because the spirit world's coming through us, using our faculties, using our psychic faculties to impress information. We're not repeating the words of the spirit. We are in that equation. And if someone keeps saying yes and it's actually inaccurate, it's so easy to go off on a tangent. And so I get into trouble working in churches because I invite the no's. And when someone hesitates, says, please say no, just say no. So I can know I'm veering off with what my Avril, my head's getting involved in the equation. I'm trying to stay in a slightly altered state of consciousness to be the clearest channel for that spirit communicator. And if I don't get a no, it is really easy to be general, to be a bit vague. So I get into a lot of trouble because people misinterpret that as lacking confidence, but it's not. It's I want no, and give me a quick no so I can understand where I've gone wrong or how I've misinterpreted. And that way you get to very specific information that is undeniable evidence, information that you could not possibly know and you absolutely could not research. And it will deliver you, it gives you confidence that you are actually working mediumistically and you have that spirit communicator with you. And when you can get such specific information, you get an astronaut coming through, you get the last Australian pilot shot down by the Red Baron in World War I. That confidence takes you further than anything. And you'll only get there through being very comfortable and in fact inviting no, because you want to get on target, very specific, mind-blowing evidence for you as well as for your sitter.
I love that. So for those listening, embrace the no's, because the no's will redirect you in the right direction to get the evidence. So Avril, can you share with us, what were your first mediumistic experiences like?
I didn't.
Afraid? Were you scared?
I didn't have any. Looking back, I only went into serious spiritualism and mediumship 25 years ago. But 10 years or 20 years before that, I'd lost my father. I was actually in a church. I had no particular spiritual inclination, you know, pretty agnostic in terms of religion, despite being brought up Church of Scotland. And I was, you know, my father died young, and I was actually in a monastery in the south of France, in an ecumenical youth camp called Taizé. And I'd gone there with a church group, and I was sitting there and we were in meditation, and I felt my father. And I got the words, "It'll be fine." And I can hardly say that without becoming emotional, which, as you know, we have to control as mediums, but we do feel it. But I didn't really, it gave me comfort, but I didn't really think that much about it. I was still in deep grief, you know, for decades after my father's passing. And
April, how old were you?
yes,
How old were you when
I
he
was
passed?
19. I was
Oh, wow.
19.
And then
So I
right
hope
after his passing, you went on that trip?
no, it was about actually, it must have been quite soon. It must have been about 18 months afterwards. So that was the first. Looking back, it was a mediumistic experience. At the time, I didn't really, if I'm honest, think about what it was. I just found it comforting. And, you know, I was pretty agnostic. I was very much into the material world and building my life. So I didn't dwell on it. But when you're talking about, you know, experiences later on, I was dragged into the College of Parapsychology. I then visited a spiritualist church in Portobello, my hometown in Edinburgh, that I'd spent my life trying to get away from. So it was interesting to be back in Portobello, feeling I had a family here. I was back at home in this church. And after about 6 months, I was invited into the closed circle. I had no expectations of wanting to develop. I just couldn't, I wanted to understand more. During my development in the circle, we weren't taught. It was a very traditional, old-fashioned way to develop. You sat in the presence of spirit. So essentially we sat in meditation, but inviting the presence of spirit forward. After the circle, we'd share our experiences. What did you feel? What did you see? And it was amazing what people saw and felt and heard. I saw and felt and heard very, very little. I'd feel hot, I'd feel cold. This was Scotland in the middle of winter. It was freezing. So I felt physical things. I could feel tickles on my face. I could feel someone coming close, but nothing that I would consider to be worthy of communication. However, I was part of the community. I was part of the development groups. I was in the circle once a week. I was helping in the church twice a week. And after about 6 months in the circle, when our mentors got the nod, they would invite you up to the public platform to demonstrate. Now, it wasn't until I got on that platform, this is very unusual, and I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. I have no expectations. These mentors obviously know more than I do. They've put so much time and effort into, you know, talking to me, befriending me, having patience with me in the circle when I get nothing, and I'm very honest. And I stood there and I did. And then in those churches in Scotland, you would just go to your recipient. You'd be drawn to someone. And then you'd give them evidence, and then usually the relationship of who you had. So I sat there with other developers, with my mentor, had to get myself out of the way, and thought, well, they know something I don't know. I stood up. I'd never done this before, not in practice class. And I thought, yes, I'm drawn to this lady over here. May I come to you? Yes. And I've got, you know, I can't remember. It wasn't outstanding, but it wasn't bad. Whether it was a bunch of roses or, you know, a necklace or a cross or something. And we only did 5 minutes. And it was concentrating on information about the spirit communicator, not psychic information about a person in the congregation. And I did it, 5 minutes, wasn't too bad. Wrapped it up, take their love from the spirit, and do a second one. Look around the room. May I come to you? Who have I got? What do they want to say? And that was it. And then I sat down. So honestly, that was my first mediumistic experience.
Wow. You had mentioned before we got on that you did platform first and then the one-on-one readings, because that's not like normal, common. That's the word, common.
No, I mean, this was a very strict, very, very old, well-established spiritualist church. And they believed that, they only took people in the circle who weren't already developed, unless it was a very special circumstances. And they believed that, you could be trusted on the public platform because you knew your ethics, you knew what you weren't to say. Because I'd learned by watching mediums working and having discussions of, well, that's not how we do it. You can't mention that. So it was about integrity. It was about ethics. It was about morality. It was about legalities. And you're not coming from a place of ego. You're actually bringing spirit communication forward. And many people didn't continue because of that. We also had to get used to the energy of working up in the platform, the quickening that happens, being in that slightly altered state of consciousness, and also coming from a spiritual and spiritualist perspective. So we were not trusted to give readings behind closed doors until we had proven that we could be competent enough and trusted enough that it wouldn't be about us, it would be about genuine spirit communication.
Oh, wow. So how does your mediumship work?
In many random ways. So
I like that answer.
And the more bizarre, the better. Through training with world-class mediums and still being in classes training with world-class mediums, we learn to surrender to whatever the spirit world brings forward as evidence in whatever way they bring it. So we know that we use the clairs. We've got clear seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing. So it is standing there completely naked and vulnerable and trying to just stay in a slightly altered state of consciousness. So you're not thinking, oh dear, I've got nothing. There's no script. And whatever comes to you, and so whether it's a clairvoyant image, whether it's a sound, whether it's a knowing, but mostly for me now, it does tend to come forward as clairvoyant image, but that image can be really, really bizarre. And often I do so much training online that often I'm drawn to something in my room that something very random that gets and I have to trust that that's where I have to go. And I can't think, what on earth? It can't be. So I had a glass tube, above my desk, and my room's so messy. So I've got lots of things that can draw my attention. And this glass candle tube, I got this impression of a man floating airless in this tube.
Wow.
And and I just stayed with that without holding on. And I felt him being sucked out of this. And I knew that's how he passed. And I knew that was to do with his employment.
Oh, wow.
So what do you do with that information? Now, through the training, we don't panic because we think, okay, that's real. I've got that, whatever it is. So I've got a man in spirit. He was doing something weightless, and he was floating, and then he was sucked away. And I know that's how he passed. And I know that was to do with his career and his calling. So, was it a sports accident? Was it a hurricane? So, but nothing just felt right. I tried to unfold it, but I couldn't get it. The recipient took it. Someone knew, could connect with and I knew this was a man in middle age. So someone said, I can understand that. Unfortunately, they were not going to give me any information. Thank goodness. So I went through the contact and I knew I got information. It wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't a sports accident, but I just had to stay with it. I could feel his personality. I could get other bits of information, but I could not understand how he passed. But I said, but he was sucked, without gravity to his death, but it was a very noble death. Now, it was a reasonable evidential contact. The person was absolutely enthralled. Wow. I was absolutely with the right person. And this man was an astronaut. And he died actually in an accident in a plane where he was ejected out of seat. Now, I could not understand that image, but I got all the other information. When she told me at the end he had been an astronaut. Wow. So how do you work with it? You work with it, you surrender. There's a huge intelligence there, and you just feel your way through it in your vulnerability.
Yes.
But it is said that one of the biggest mistakes in evidential platform mediumship is to go to the wrong recipient.
Oh,
because if you have general information, many people can take it. Someone that may not even say they can take it because there's too many other people, and then the no's are continuous. So it's so important to get to the right recipient as quickly as you can and as effectively as you can. And you're only going to do that with specific information.
Yeah.
So another great example was I got a clairvoyant image of Dick Tracy, the movie.
Oh, wow.
So that was with, the gangster movie with Madonna and all the rest of it. So, and I knew this was someone's uncle. I just knew it. So I said to the audience, so I've got uncle in spirit, and his name was I can't remember. This is a long time ago. Can't remember actually how I. So the name's Dick and the name Tracy, they could accept uncle, and they could accept that he had involvement in a scenario like the Dick Tracy scenario. Now, this was actually a very confronting contact, and it was a different one for me because I'd never had a contact where the person didn't live a noble life. Oh, wow. So I was using this Dick Tracy movie, and I'm thinking Disney, and, he was a bit of a gangster, and, yes, he was a bit of a gangster, and, and, oh, he was friends with Frank Sinatra. Yes. And, oh, he was in Chicago. Yes. And my love and light impression of the spirit world, and it's all, and my recipient was not happy hearing from her uncle. And I'm in the moment, I'm in the zone, I'm not pinning it all together, but I had all the elements. Oh, he was murdered in his bed. His nickname was the banker. But I'm coming from love and light. This is all, and I'm thinking, why is my recipient looking a bit concerned? Her uncle was a Chicago mobster.
Oh, wow.
But that was a great lesson for me, because I think if I'd known I had a Chicago mobster communicating, as a spiritualist, I would have questioned, what's the higher good of that? This uncle came through a second time in a different, to the same lady again. And she's a very notable, well-respected. Wow. And once again, but he came through in a different way. So I wasn't entirely sure it was him that time, but the evidence was strong, but different. But the message component was that she had done so much good in her life it had balanced all the skeletons in the cupboard of
Oh,
things
wow.
that the family history and that sort of thing. So that was a huge learning experience for me to understand that anyone can come through. I do believe through experience and through, talking to my mentors that, it is only with good intent that the spirit worlds are allowed to communicate, but we don't control if someone has done something bad in that life, because ultimately mediumship is about healing, and we're not
True.
only healing, the recipient here, we're there to heal the spirit communicator. And on occasion, especially in churches, we can give communications where primarily the healing's for the spirit communicator, especially if they've not done the right thing by the recipient. But we have to trust and we have to know what we're doing properly so that we can manage that and make it healing for both parties. So it can get that, and I'll give you one more example. This was lovely. So I was in a church, and there was this lady in her 90s, and she had the Scottish accent, and I had her husband, and he came and he was beside me, and he was so dapper and he was so gorgeous, and as they are, and and I've got my suit on, and I'm just, the ladies just love me. And her sarcasm, now I didn't know she was actually a medium herself. I just saw this old Scottish lady who was being potentially traumatized by this communication in her community group. So I've got your husband, that'll be right. Oh, is it all right if I work with him? Absolutely. And every time he gave information about his work or their relationship or their children or their family, I got a very firm, sarcastic answer. And she started to make jokes of things. And I thought, I've just felt she must be embarrassed, right? And we went through this. And this lady just gave her husband a really good telling off. And he stayed there, and I could feel him, and the information kept flowing. And and then there was a message, and she was, well, yeah, that's what you always said, but I don't really believe it. And I was shocked, because I'm here for the greater good. I'm not here to embarrass people. And afterwards, we were having a cup of tea, and she and I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I hope that didn't embarrass you, your husband coming through like that. She said, Avril, best night of my life. She said, and I said, but were you not embarrassed in front of all your community? Because you seemed to be quite hostile towards him. She said, I never got the chance to tell him off when he was here, but I have now. And she said, when she attended his funeral, with her grown-up adult children, 2 of his other wives attended the funeral as well.
Oh,
He had been a bigamist, and she didn't find out. So that's a bit of a controversial story. But as the medium and surrendering to what comes forward, wow, we have to trust. And,
wow.
for me as a medium, it took a little while to understand what had happened and not to feel, oh, this is just too risky or vulnerable. So I guess that takes us back to training, to knowledge of what you're doing. It's great because we can make all these mistakes in the classroom.
Yes.
And we also learn, oh, wow, a mobster can come through. Someone can come through, a bigamist can come through.
Everybody.
But and this is where, it's lifelong development and mediumship. Everyone needs a mentor, someone that's got more experience than you. There are tricky situations that you think, is this doing any harm? That you can, talk to someone who has got the same integrity, the same ethics, and actually understand. But what it does is it takes your mediumship to the next level and the next level.
It does. So now I am curious, Avril, since you do a lot of platform demonstrations, has this ever happened to you where you bring through a contact and the person in the audience is like, no, nope, nope, ain't taking it. Don't want to talk to them. I'm still angry at them. Make them go away. Has that happened to you? Just curious.
There's two ways to answer that. So, you know, some communities seem to think in platform demonstrations that if they don't, they want to hear from a specific person, and that if you're not bringing that person through and they don't particularly want to hear from who's coming through, because as you know, we don't control that if we're working with integrity, they will say no when it should be yes, to hope that you get a switch of communicator coming through. So I have experienced that. And what I would say is if you really feel your information is correct and you're with the right person and they're saying no, 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 what I would do now is say, well, I'm obviously not with you. I'll just have to stop there. It's amazing how quickly someone will say, oh, actually, I can take all that. Right? Wow. Or there is occasion where you just know that something's happened that was unfortunate and they're a bit reluctant, but you must ask their permission. You must say, can I work? And if it's a no, it's a no. But I've rarely had a no. I've had a, well, I'm not too sure. And that's when you tiptoe gently. But actually the spirit world's very clever. And I've never uttered something that I shouldn't have, or I know that their language might be a bit blue at times, but I've never heard the word. Or I think spirit, if we're really in the blend with a spirit communicator, that safeguards in place.
Yeah.
So I have had situations where people say, oh, I'm not sure, or especially in a private reading, then just tiptoe with it. But it usually, through experience, you can work through it. And also, it's not just about the information you're bringing forward, it's the feeling. I have had one where I do actually now remember a situation. So there was a young girl in the church community, maybe about 17 years old, and I was aware of her father. But when I'm aware of a spirit communicator that stands far behind me, I know they're there to note their presence, but they don't actually have a communication to make. And through experience, I know that means that they've done significant harm to the person. And I said to this, I've got your father in spirit. I gave some information and I could just feel that there was an issue. And an awareness came that, yeah, I know there was abuse there, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that is not, I got no more than that. And I didn't deliver that because I knew it wasn't right. And I just said, well, I'm aware your father's here and he's in the spirit world. And I then said to her, but I know that he has an apology. Nothing could make up for it, but he just wants to say that he's at peace and you'll never hear from him again. Now, that's a very unusual thing to say as a medium, because we want to feel we still have connection. And then immediately her grandmother, who loved her to bits, came in and it was great. And when we left, when I was collecting the hymn books after the service, and this girl came up and wanted to give me a big hug and said, I have been so terrified that my father will get me from the other side because he abused me when he was here. So that was another very sensitive, very difficult situation in which I'm so glad I had the integrity and the guidance from a traditional spiritualist mediums, long-term evidential mediums, on these things can happen. We have to be working with integrity, and we have to be working with from a spiritual perspective. Absolutely not from, wow, that was great evidence, tick the box, entertainment, ego perspective, because it would be so easy to misrepresent what we're getting. You know, we have to have the confidence of standing in our power, our awareness, our knowledge in the moment of doing it. So I knew he was there. I knew he wasn't speaking. Oh, I had some evidence, and she took it, and I knew in the middle. And then I got those words about, I'm at peace now. I can't make up for what I did, and I will never bother you again. Something like that.
Yeah. And that's what she needed to hear.
And her question had been, she had been terrified.
Yeah.
And she'd been terrified. And I, you know, obviously I could sense that when I gave her that. But I do say, can I work with you? Yes. But that was a healing that was needed. But this is the spirit, the intelligence of the spirit world, that we have to know our craft well enough.
Yes. Yes.
When we're in the moment, and in that moment of, you know, and you know, when you speak to others, you know, peers of yours and mentors, and you say, but you know, why me? You know, I'm not, you know, why am I bringing through these difficult contacts? And they say, well, for all of us, we're the ones that we can deliver this without harming someone, or without,
I like that,
putting fear into someone. And, you know, and also answering, you know, can he harm me now from the other side? Is there a dark energy? No, because there's so much misinterpretation. And you'll know yourself as you know, when you're doing private readings, a lot of our work is debunking things that people have been told, outrageous claims by, you know, incompetent mediums, you know, for lack of another word, that, you know, not intentionally even, but just not portraying it, and said, you know, predicting someone in the family is going to die, or there's cancer, or there's, you know, there's a dark energy. We know in our work those are not relevant concepts. So when you get something like that, you know, you don't portray it as, oh, there's a dark energy with your father, and, you know, you still it's so important that you know your craft. You can do it, you know what you're doing, and you know if you make a mistake. I mean, occasionally, although I've said that, you know, you know, a swear word has never come out my mouth, although I may be aware that their language could be pretty colorful, but I don't actually do that. But I will maybe put something in a way that you can see is misinterpreted. And this is particularly important on the platform, because no matter where, you do not know how vulnerable your recipient is.
That's so
or
true.
How gullible, or, you know, they don't want to say no to you. They trust everything you say. So once again, no is really important. You know, and to make them do that, you know, if you don't understand, tell me, because it's maybe the way I'm expressing it, especially when we're so multicultural, we're working in different countries, you know, jumpers, cardigans, you know, sweaters, you know, trousers, it's different language all around. So if something comes out and I know that it's been taken the wrong way, then I'll say, oh, let me rephrase that. Let me say that, because, or I'll add on something from my knowledge. This is what the spirit communicator is making me aware of. It is not a prediction. It is not set in stone. It is not, you know, or this is not, you know, we've got to be very careful that we don't give specialist advice, that we don't go out with the boundaries of what we have of our craft. This, you know, ensuring that they've actually understand what it is you're communicating is so important. And I think as mediums, we learn from our difficult situations. And I had one, sorry, you can't get me to stop talking now. I had one in a church where this lady's brother came forward. He had taken his life, but he was reminding them of childhood memories. And it was such a beautiful contact. And she just seemed so relaxed and so at peace. But afterwards, which is always the case, you know, they come up to you at the end of the church services and give you some feedback, or, you know, and she said to me, thank you. That was just what I needed to hear, because you have told me that I would be better off in the spirit world. No. How on earth did you get, I did not. I've said that your brother's in, a good place for him. But, you are not better off in the spirit world. Your life is here. You have to get on with your life. Oh, and I don't know how she got that impression, and that troubled me greatly. And I had to say to her then, listen, this is what mediumship's all about. This is what I absolutely did not get that from the spirit world. And this is, this is not the right interpretation. And I could see her state of mind was extremely vulnerable. And I have to say that shocked me, that I could potentially, one could potentially do harm. And I'd spoken to people who were there, and there was nothing in that had given that impression. Thank goodness that lady had spoken to me.
Yes.
And she wasn't happy. She was not happy with me. She wrote a letter of complaint because, I was unspiritual, and I had told her that she shouldn't be in the spirit world. And wow, you do not know who you're giving a communication to, their state of mind. So we have to be so cognizant. So now I don't think I'm misrepresented anything in that case, but now I'm ultra aware. If someone's taking something the wrong way, that you are making sure you're delivering it carefully and ethically, so nobody can misinterpret what you're saying. That's a very scary example, but it's very real.
It is very real. I think it's important too, because you're sharing a lot of your stories, which I love. And for those that are out there and mediums in training and mediums looking forward to doing platform presentations, these are powerful stories to share, because then you never know, like that may happen to you and you'll remember this interview and be like, what happened to her? And she was okay. And I think the most important thing too is a lot of people, at least I'm just speaking from my own experience, that go in for mediumship readings are in pain, are in grief, are vulnerable, and you don't know where they are in their grief and their pain, and they can hear bits and pieces of what you're saying because the grief. I know for myself, I had a reading once, and it was after a passing of a loved one, but the grief was so deep, and I heard the first part of the medium, and then my mind went to that story, and then all I heard after that was kind of like the Charlie Brown walk walk. I didn't hear anything else, because then I was like, I was in that story. I was like, oh wait, she's already moved along, and I'm still taking in that story because my mind at that time needed to go slow. So I have had readings. Interesting enough, I've always been on the receiving end of some really not good mediumship readings or psychic readings. And what I've learned from spirit, or maybe it's just part of my life path, is what never to do to another person. Because I've had those hard lessons where I walk away and in my head, I know everything they said ethically. It was just like, that was so wrong. I know that in my head, but it's weird because it still affects you. It's like really interesting on that. But I love that you took the time with her, and it's like, okay, let's break down that reading. Let's see where you're at, to break it down, to make sure she walked away okay. And you talk about that, the ethics being so important. So for people that are listening to that, remember, like, as mediums, you're actually in a position of power, because people are coming to you for help because they feel lost, they feel vulnerable, and they're handing over all of their power to you, and then reminding them, guess what? You have free will. And let's give you some power, and let's empower you to make choices. And here's what the evidence said, and leaving them better than you found them, and the
Absolutely.
messages. Yes. I think that's so beautiful. And I love that you shared those stories, because I know those stories to a lot of mediums that are out there in training will be like, wait, I had that experience. Oh, okay, that's what's happening. Oh, I understand this now. I'm not alone. That's my biggest one when I share stories. I'm always
Oh,
looking for a
absolutely.
medium. Yes, that's had the same experience. Like, oh, please tell me I'm not the only one. Anybody have this experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I joke with my colleagues, it's like, of all the things you would choose to bring forward as evidence, it wouldn't be what we did tonight.
Yes.
And really, you can't make this stuff up. Gold nuggets, it's weird, it's wonderful, it's difficult, but boy, it's out of this world, literally.
Do you find a lot of the evidence will mirror some of your life experiences that come through, and that's why they chose you?
I think so. I think, the medium is chosen, excuse me, by the communicator. But I've had examples where I have done a public demonstration with other mediums, and I've gone to one recipient with a highly emotional contact from her son in spirit, her adult son, who had taken his life. And this lady it was tears of joy. It was such an emotional contact. And then another medium went to the same lady with evidence of how the man passed. It was very confronting, but it was very evidential. And as a medium, I couldn't help sitting there reflecting, thinking, well, why didn't I get a glimpse of any of that? Why didn't, obviously the spirit communicator didn't want that to come through me. And then afterwards, when I reflected on it, and my colleague did so well, it was apparent that that's the sort of evidence that comes through her very well. The fire, when he was found, all that sort of stuff. But she's not good at presenting emotional, connecting evidence. So on that day, I was used for the evidential communication, the emotional communication that was evidential enough. But she was given she was able to access the highly evidential facts.
Yes.
That were confronting. So it's interesting. So absolutely, it's how they can impress on you and use you. And it's through experience that we know that. And it's also having empathy that
Yes.
I think, you can have a mobster coming through. You can have someone that's taken their lives in a very confronting way, but you can be trusted to express that in a way that is not going to re-traumatize someone.
That's so important. Yes.
And sometimes I've had very confronting evidence, very confronting evidence, murder, suicide. And sometimes the evidence can be given in a way that it's important to give it because it's inconclusive, that is evidence, but it's delivering it in a way, and also delivering things. And if it's been, substance abuse, or it's been an overdose, is not being judgmental and it not coming through when you're presenting it, especially in public, in a way that's going to humiliate, embarrass, or traumatize. We're not there to showcase. And it's hard as a medium because sometimes we're compromising how great we could look because we're very aware of ensuring that we deliver this and do no harm, especially in public, to the recipient. And that's part of the training, and that's part of the reason you are chosen, I think, or that you're used as a channel for these difficult spirit communicators, because it is difficult. You're under pressure. It is risky because there's things involved that are very sensitive, but you're trusted to be able to deliver that in a way that is evidential enough. And you trust the intelligence of spirit that it can be wrapped up, or you receive it in a way but sometimes you are aware of things that you absolutely have to deal. So it's a very serious responsibility to be a medium, to be a psychic, because,
I think so.
even as
Yes.
we're aware of things about people, it's exactly the same. And we know that in our development, especially sitting in the presence with spirit, that it works on our triggers, our subconscious, all those things that make us react in ways that we don't expect. So we are as clear a channel as we can be, that we're not being triggered. If you have experiences with domestic abuse and you've got someone coming, a communicator from spirit, and you're aware that that's an element of what's happened, how they've behaved when they were alive, that you do not get triggered into reacting in a way that's not in the best interest of your sitter. So there's huge, and you have to know what you're doing. You have to have the knowledge of the craft, and you have to have experience to be doing. There absolutely is a level of professionalism that's required.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say. I love your stories. I'm just like so into the stories. Okay, this is what I was
But
going
we
to say.
need to share that as colleagues, don't we? Because
Yes.
it's like, you'll never believe what, the grandparents who were bootleggers. I had a grandfather who was a witch doctor.
Oh, I
And
love
I
that.
actually had to say witch doctor because I got a clairvoyant image of the mask that he wore. And I knew that he was, and from my cultural background, witch doctor is a bit, it's a bit dark. It's a bit, but this was in Fiji, and he was the community shaman, but he was grandfather to a lady in Australia.
Oh, I love that.
But you have to be able to, because if I'd watered it down and said, well, he was into the spooky stuff, but to say witch doctor and then be able to follow through with not giving the wrong impression about ridiculous things like dark energies, or staying within your training, your knowledge. It is love, it is about the higher good. You can get into the nitty-gritty of the sensitivities, which is amazing evidence.
I love that. I am curious, your upbringing, was it like Catholic, spiritual? Like, how did you grow up
No,
with all of this, or none of
a
this?
Church of Scotland Protestant. It was very liberal. I was a part of the church community. My parents were elders in the church. I went to the badminton club, the social club. It was a nice community. I can't say I was drawn by the sermons I loved the church. I loved the Christmas Eve service. I liked that element being sacred, but I would say I was probably agnostic. I didn't believe. And when I got into my 20s and left that community, went off to university, life took over. I enjoyed traveling, I enjoyed my material life, having a family, having a career. So it didn't really, religion, spiritual, there was a spiritual essence, I guess. I was always intrigued in, what's the meaning of life, and a bit more philosophical, more academic. So the spiritual aspect didn't really come in until I was dragged into the College of Parapsychology in Edinburgh.
I love
And
how
then
you
it was
say that. I was dragged in, they forced me, they made me.
And I was blown away. I was and my friend was very gifted psychically. I know you need this, and she'd tell me all her stories, and it's yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you've got something to cling on to. I don't really understand it. I understand why people might need it, and then I went in and boom, evidential mediumship. And this is why, I guess my real passion is that, had I walked into a church or a spiritual center and it was airy fairy, mumbo jumbo, and I would never have gone any further. I literally would have gone, well, that's nice, that's for you. Everyone to his own, and let me out as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So everyone that walks through that door should have a credible experience. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't particularly see my need for it. I could understand if someone was grieving, if they'd lost a child, if they'd had dramatic, I could understand the need.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I walked through a door of that spiritualist church, I got a message from a different medium. I got contact saying, you're going to be up here one day, to which I said, not likely. Why would I want to do that? Because it was this mystical, magical, sacred, gifted, these people were clearly born with this gift. It was so special. So that's going back to our mediums born or made or nature, nurture. When I first went in, it was beyond my comprehension. Do they see spirit? Can they touch it? What's this all about? But it was credible, and I could not explain what I was seeing from a perspective in psychology, from philosophy. I couldn't. And these credible people, these everyday professional people that were doing this, no nonsense, making such a huge difference. And it wasn't that I want to help other people, I want to serve. I wanted to know what was going on. What was this? Yes. And that changed my life. That took me back to the little town in Edinburgh, the seaside town I spent my life working to grow up and get away from. Humble beginnings, fabulous beginnings, and the church, back in a church in Portobello. Yeah. And becoming and having religious inclinations.
I love it.
Blow me down. And I was there as an observer, I guess as a researcher, and embracing, it felt like home, the energy. I'm not someone who's particularly sensitive to energies. I'm sensitive, I think, to other people's emotions, but not particularly to energies. If the spirit world's wanting to give me a message, they have to trip me up to, like most mediums. Yes, hello. It takes a bit longer. But, that changed my life in one demonstration. And I feel so passionate that anyone walking into a public demonstration or a sitting of mediumship gets a credible experience, and you get them on their journey of discovery. Yeah. Now, if they never come back into that church, that doesn't matter. They have that knowledge that's unforgettable. If that draws them to start to read spiritual books, to try to, to become interested in their spiritual essence, their authentic self, and starts, because it is a journey. It is not a destination. And when you come into development, I feel so lucky that I didn't come in wanting to be a medium with an agenda. I came in and had honestly a spiritual experience and a spiritual rebirth, I guess. Yes. Midlife, it happened that I developed into becoming a medium. I didn't seek it. I sought further knowledge. But given that ability, and given the dedication of those people that helped, that sat in circle, that sat in the presence, that demonstrated on the platform, that held only credible evidential mediumship within this church, that was my spiritual journey that came before the mediumship. Yes. And if I hadn't embraced that, I would not have gone on that platform with nothing in public. I mean, I had done public speaking in business, so I wasn't that phased, and it didn't mind. I think my super strength is being vulnerable and not being embarrassed in public, although I don't like public speaking, and I don't particularly like interviews, as you know. But once it starts to flow,
I have enjoyed I have absolutely enjoyed this time. We're coming to our end. You are so passionate about the demonstration, the tech, and I love that because I think like if we're doing this work, we need to be passionate about our work and the training and how you mentioned like you're still training, as am I. Like I feel like I will be in school for the rest of my life because it's like, oh, I found out about this. Well, there's more stuff and there's all this
Oh,
amazing, incredible stuff. It's like going down the rabbit hole that never ends, but it's so much fun and you get to meet these incredible mediums from around the world, which I absolutely
oh.
love. And I got to meet you today. And what a treat that is for me. And I want to say thank you. So, as we come to a close, if people want to contact you, how would they contact you? Is there a website that you have, like the name of your website?
Yeah, so it's avril.johnson-craig at wordpress.com, I think, but you'll have to
Okay.
maybe put that in the comments.
Yes,
And
I
there I
will.
have a Facebook presence as well.
Okay.
So I'll give you that as well.
Okay.
So
So
I think it's Avril Craig Medium, not Johnson Craig, Avril Craig Medium. You can tell that marketing is not my strength.
that's okay. I will include it in the show notes. And so people can look underneath when we put this interview up because it is a podcast and it will be on YouTube. So for those that just want to listen or those that want to see the visual and see us and get to know us, see what we look like, the video will be on YouTube too. And all the information will be below. And I just want to say thank you so much. I want to wish you Happy New Year. They're in Australia. I'm in Canada. Our New Year is not till tomorrow. So Happy New Year. And thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And you know, the hour has got, you've made this so easy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye, everybody.